People have strong opinions about politics, religion, foreign policy, sourdough bread baking methods, and believe it or not, apple pie. So what am I talking about here? There's really one thing that divides people about apple pie, and it's not the crust or making your own pie dough, it's the apples. Some people feel very strongly that to make a proper apple pie, you got to start with raw apples going into the pie dough or pie tin. And that's cool, and it can work, but if this is a project that you're doing once a year, I'm thinking Thanksgiving or Christmas or something like that, or just apple season, it adds a lot of unpredictability because we're working with a raw ingredient that's going to release a lot of liquid, and it's going to change cooking time, evaporation, ripeness plays a role. All kinds of things make that method harder to execute on with a consistent result. So there's that line in the sand, raw apples versus cooked apples. I'm on the cooked apple side because we're going to produce a very consistent, repeatable result. We have complete control of how much sauce or syrup is going to end up in the finished pie. We've got complete control over our flavor. And also it really speeds up our assembly and cooking of the pie itself. So there's a lot of advantages here, and if this is a once a year activity, it's going to make, and on a big holiday like a Thanksgiving or a Christmas, it streamlines everything that's happening in the kitchen. It really makes the pie a simple thing with a lot of prep that can happen the day before. So I like this method. I think it makes it so you have a really solid go-to apple pie method. What kind of apples? I like Fuji. Fuji apples are great because they have a good sweet and sour, but they have a nice pectin content. Meaning that when they are cooked, they're going to have a nice consistency. They're going to be tender, but they're not going to blow apart. They're going to have, tender, but some mouthfeel, some bite to them, but not crunchy. A Granny Smith is also a good choice. The recipe's in the description. We're going to go through the method. We're going to walk through it just to make this really clear. We're going to start with the apples, then we're going to do the crumble, and then we're going to do the pie. We're going to talk about those things separately, but then at the end, I'll give you some insight as to how these can all fit together while we're almost doing everything kind of at the same time. Just, for time efficiency's sake. I like Fuji apples. Here we are, recipes in the description. We've got about 8 or 9 apples. I'm not really going to talk ingredients. You can see it. You can link in the description, Peel them all. Let's do everything assembly line fashion. We do all the same thing every step of the way. I love these peelers. They're amazing. Link in the description. Pack of them on Amazon for like $9 or $10. They're super sharp. They work great. If you're in a restaurant environment, you'll see these in every prep guy's arsenal toolkit. So we're peeling them, all of them, and then we're going to cut them off the core. And I want to do this kind of in a specific way. So I want to cut off a big side, and then I want to cut off another big side. So then there's 2 skinnier sides left, and we'll cut the 2 skinny sides off. These 2 skinny sides are the perfect size to be sliced. The big pieces, the bigger pieces, they're similar to looking like a half, but they're not. We're going to cut into thirds. So we're going to go through, we're going to organize all of our pieces. So the bigger pieces are cut into thirds. The little guys you don't need to do anything with. Get organized on your cutting board, and now we're going to slice them. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 1/8 of an inch. They don't have to be perfect. You don't need a tape measure. Just make them a pretty consistent size so when we go to cook them, they cook consistently. As your pile of sliced apples gets bigger, get it out of your way, put it into a stainless steel mixing bowl, slice up all your apples, and then we're going to marinate them with the sugar and the salt and the cinnamon and lemon juice that's in the recipe. Mix them together, turn them over a few times. We want to get these ingredients drawing moisture out of the apples. It's going to help streamline our cooking process and just make it a little bit more intuitive. We're going to let them sit for about 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, to really get some good liquid out of the apples. After they've been sitting, we're going to get a pot going. I've got a 6-quart pot. I'm going to put my butter in there, and I'm going to lightly brown it on medium heat. I'm using a Kerrygold butter, which has kind of a low water or milk protein content, milk solids. So there's not gonna be a ton of browning happening here. If you're using more of like a Land O'Lakes or maybe even like a Tillamook butter, you'll see a lot more browning. It's just gonna be more flavor for you. The butter, I like it because it does add flavor, but it adds a kind of a different, like smoother mouthfeel in the finished pie. It makes it just a little bit richer. Okay, my butter is lightly browned. I'm adding my apples and all of the liquid that's in here, in the bowl. Get everything out, everything into the pot. We're gonna turn the heat up to high and we're gonna bring it to kind of like a boil. Stir it around, get some good heat on the apples, and then we wanna turn it down low to a very gentle simmer. We want there to be like little movement, little bubbles. There's movement action happening in the pot, but it's not going crazy. And, you know, on your dial on your stove, if it goes from 1 to 10, we're gonna be down there in that like maybe 2 kind of range. We're gonna cover our pot and we're gonna cook these guys for like 20 or 30 minutes. Maybe come by after the first, 5 or 10 minutes and just check them just to make sure that covering them hasn't really accelerated and trapped, the heat. And give them a stir. So stir them after 10 minutes, stir them after 10 minutes, and then after 30, open them up, take a look at them, and we're probably gonna go uncovered from here if they've been, simmering along. Stir them around. They should taste them also. You taste them in the beginning, taste them in the middle, taste them as they cook. Observe how the flavor changes. That's an important skill to develop on its own. And from here, after about the first 30 minutes, we're gonna go for maybe another 20 or 30 minutes uncovered for the purpose of reducing our sauce. So there should be quite a bit of liquid in there. And we wanna go until the apples are translucent and tender. And you'll see them change. Like they'll start out and they'll be crunchy. And then they'll get to a point where they're starting to get translucent, but you can see like the middles are still more of an opaque. We want to get them like cooked, because remember, when we're done, this is your apple pie filling. So you know exactly what you're going to get in a pie when you're done here. So 30 minutes uncovered neighborhood of, we want it simmering gently. Depending on what your interpretation of gently is, it should look something like this. It may go faster or slower. I want to have about this much sauce in the pot when I'm done, because this suits my preference. This is going to make a pie that is moist, but is not leaking juices all over the place when you put a slice down. It's also not so much that it's just going to be like dry, because we don't want a dry apple pie. Now, like I said, you have a lot of control here because you can taste it. So taste it. If you decide you want it sweeter, know this. So when it's hot, it naturally has like more of a sweetness to it. When it's cold, it's going to taste less sweet. If you're serving your pie more at kind of a room temperature, it'll probably just be fine from here if it tastes nice. If you do decide to add more sugar to it, or it needs just a hit more salt, salt's fine, but if you do add sugar, you want to bring it back up to like a rolling boil to make sure that sugar becomes part of the sauce. Think of making a simple syrup. If you don't boil the water and the sugar together, you don't get a syrup. And the same is true here. We want that sugar to be completely melted into solution. So we've got the right viscosity. Our apples are translucent and tender. We like our flavor. We're gonna cool this down. We're gonna ice it down, get it cold, and then put it in the container and put it in the fridge. Get all the sauce out, get all the apples out. When you go to assemble the next day, as this gets cold, it's gonna gel and it's gonna look like you don't have enough sauce. You're gonna be fine unless you've reduced it too much. But expect for it to look dry when it is cold. Thing 2, what are we doing? Let's make the crumble. The crumble's very easy and it does hold for a good 5 or 6 days in the fridge, so you could do this well in advance if you wanted to. Simple thing, we're gonna take all of our dry ingredients, we're gonna mix them together till they're thoroughly combined, and then we're gonna melt our butter. The butter, we wanna melt it so it's like creamy. We don't want it to break, and we certainly don't wanna brown it. So melt it down and then pull it off the heat and stir it around. We don't wanna put hot butter into our dry ingredients. You don't want it sizzling. It should never sizzle. It should just be melted creamy butter. So we're gonna pour the butter into our dry ingredients, use a spatula, get all the butter out of whatever you're melting it in. And we're gonna mix it into the dry ingredients. And we're looking for it to be lumpy and chunky, but it's also gonna have like some loose bits. And usually it's like the oats that you have some like straggler oats. We don't want to mix it so much that we make a paste, because then we don't have a crumble topping anymore, and there's kind of no coming back from mixing it into a paste. So mix it until it's chunky. We've got, inconsistent nuggets, big ones, little ones, medium ones, some sandy stuff. That's all fine, because we're going to cool this off, put it in the fridge, and the next day, if there are big ones, we can break them up. So it's not a problem. So the crumble's done. Easy task. What's next? The pie dough. And this freaks people out, making their own pie dough. If you don't want to do it, fine, go buy like a pre-made crust, and then you're off the hook and things are really easy. But I think learning how to make a go-to pie dough like this is a really fundamental skill. This is a pie dough that is a very neutral flavor. It does have a little bit of sugar, but not so much that you couldn't use this for like a pot pie or some other culinary application. This is a pretty solid recipe. It's very buttery, it's very flaky. Here we go. I'm gonna use a KitchenAid mixer. If you don't have one, a dough whisk is a good tool, or if you don't have a dough whisk, you could fight a dough together, a pie dough together with just a regular whisk. But I recommend a KitchenAid mixer, some kind of standing mixer. I'm gonna take my dry ingredients, the few that there are in this recipe, the flour, all-purpose. Don't use bread flour. Bread flour is too strong. We want an all-purpose flour so we have like a tender, flaky pie crust. Salt, sugar, easy. We're gonna mix that together just to distribute the salt and the sugar. And then I have 227 grams of butter, because that's how much a 8-ounce block of Kerrygold butter is. And I've adapted this recipe to it's just a block of butter. We just use the whole thing. This also makes just about the right amount of pie dough for a 9-inch pie, with a little bit of extra for maybe a creative project on the side. Butter, it's got to be cold. We want it diced into small cubes, maybe 1/2 inch or so neighborhood. Doesn't have to be perfect. And we're going cold diced butter into the KitchenAid mixer with the flour and salt and sugar. And we're going to mix it with a paddle, probably 5 to 7 minutes, somewhere in that neighborhood. We're looking for the butter and flour to come together so there's like sandy bits, but also I want popcorn kernel sized chunks of floury butter and maybe some pea sized chunks. The chunks are important because as we roll everything out, and you might see little streaks of butter in the pie dough, it's going to create layers, and it's going to help have some of that flakiness in the finished pie crust that makes, for an awesome pie crust. We want flaky pie crust. So leaving some pea size, popcorn kernel size, and then some sandy chunks is what you're looking for. When you have that kind of consistency, we're gonna add our ice cold water. Yes, ice cold. We want everything cold so our butter's not getting melted and turning our dough into like a sandy kind of thing where we don't get that flakiness in the finished crust. So cold is important. Cold water goes in, we're gonna mix it till it comes together. We don't wanna overwork the gluten proteins in the flour, because then we won't have a nice light flaky crust. So just enough to get it to come together, and it doesn't have to be like perfect. It can be a little rough. I mean, you can see what this looks like. I'm gonna take this out and put it onto a piece of parchment paper, and I want a piece of parchment paper that I can use, big enough that I can roll out a big disc, like for my pie later, so I don't have to waste paper. Paper Chef is a great brand. It's my favorite brand of parchment paper that I can get for my house. And they have it at Costco, comes in a pack of 2. It's a bit wider than like the Reynolds Wrap or some of the other brands. So this is a size parchment paper that makes rolling out a big disc easier. So I'm just gonna, for now, put it onto the parchment paper and shape it into like a 1-inch thick disc. This is gonna set me up for success later. If you just make a ball of dough, you are gonna fight with it when it's time to roll it out, because we want to get it cold, right? I've mentioned cold a few times. So 1-inch thick disc in between 2 pieces of parchment paper on a half sheet tray into the fridge for 1 or 2 hours. I want it cold, because when I'm rolling it, I don't want my butter to melt, right? Flaky crust, another step for that. So 1 or 2 hours, we can bring it out. We're gonna roll it out with a rolling pin in between the 2 pieces of parchment paper. You can work your way from 12 to 6. You can work your way from 10 to 4, from 2 to 8, and just, try and create a nice even layer of dough that's gonna be somewhere in the neighborhood of like 1/8 to 1/4 inch thick. On the thin side, it might not hold your pie very well. On the thicker side, then you've got quite a bit of crust to deal with. So I find that it's just a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch, maybe somewhere in between 1/8 and 1/4, but you don't need a tape measure. We just want to roll it out into a disc that when you turn your pie tin over, if you're using a 9-inch pie tin, you should have like 2 or 3 inches of dough sticking out around the pie tin. And honestly, once you get to that size, it's probably going to be the right thickness anyway, based on this dough recipe. Okay, so you've rolled it out. We've got the right thickness, the right size circle of dough. Now, this is kind of an important step. You want to release the paper off of one side and then put it back on. We're going to flip the whole thing over, and then we're going to remove the new top piece of paper, and you can discard it or save it for something or whatever. It's going to have a little dough on it. And now we can take this pie tin that we have and put it upside down on the dough. We have a surface of dough exposed, and then we're going to get under the paper and we're going to flip it over. Now it's easy to remove this new top side piece of paper because we've already released it. If you don't release it first and then you put it into the pie tin, it's going to be really hard to get it off because the dough will be kind of folded into the tin. So essential step. So paper's off. We've got the dough in the tin, and now you're going to form it in there. You don't want to stretch it. You want to really just try and lift and form the dough into the pie tin without creating any thin spots. Press it in there, work your way around, be gentle. And then I'm choosing to use a paring knife, and I'm going to take all this excess dough off. I'm going to save it for another project. Alternatively, we could take all this excess dough that's all around the sides, and we can fold it around the edges in kind of waves to create just extra crust. People love the crust, so that's a choice too. At the end of the day, I'm not too worried about having like a little ball of pie dough that I have to get creative with. But one of the worst things that can happen is not having enough pie dough to fill a tin. So I'm always happy to have a little bit of extra. Okay, we've got dough in a tin. It looks amazing. It's beautiful. We're gonna wrap it in plastic. It's going in the fridge to get cold. It's ready for the next day. All right, next day, let's say this is a Thanksgiving type of situation or a Christmas day or whatever, some holiday. I generally go pie in the morning and just kind of get it out of the way. I bring the apples out, let them temper, have coffee, eat breakfast, preheat the oven. So the oven's preheated to 400 degrees. We're gonna take out our pie tin with the dough in it, and we're gonna load the apples in it. Scrape everything out, get all the sauce in there, all the juices, spread it into an even layer. Go get your crumble, it's ready to go. You can kind of break it up if there's any weird big chunks, although I think everybody kind of likes the big chunks on the pie. And I'm gonna use all of it. I'm just going all over the pie, spread it all the way out to the crust. You try and get a good even layer everywhere. And it's ready to go in the oven. So oven's preheated to 400 degrees. I like to bake the pie on a sheet tray, half sheet tray with parchment paper to catch any juices that might fall off. Because I want to have the wonderful aroma of apple pie and cinnamon in the house and not burnt sugar. It makes cleanup easy. Okay, so pie in at 400 in the middle of the oven for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, you're going to rotate it 180 degrees and turn it down to 375. When you go to spin it, you'll probably notice like some juices kind of bubbling up. The crumble itself insulates. So what's it made of? It's got a bunch of butter and sugar, and all that butter and sugar is gonna kind of melt down to create, a wonderful crust that gives us great texture when we get to the plate. But it also keeps a lot of the moisture inside the pie as it's baking. So you might notice some bubbling, which is cool. 375 now for 30 minutes longer. And the purpose of this is really just to make sure our crust is completely cooked, our crumble is cooked, and the pie is, hot inside, and all those apples have a chance to kind of reorganize themselves and really sit together. And then coloring, like we want the crumble to be a nice color. You're in charge. I like this. This works for me. If you wanted to go darker, fine, just keep going. If you wanted it to be lighter, cover it with some tin foil once you get to the color you like. And total time in the oven for me, about an hour. Pull it out, and it needs to cool for 3 hours. And if we start this at 9 a.m., plenty of time to do that. Serving, I mean, you're in charge of however you want to serve it, but who doesn't like apple pie with, vanilla ice cream and some whipped cream? So that's the direction that we go with it. That's what we like. And for serving it, I just like room temperature. it's had a chance to rest for, the apples to really gel up, and I can get some nice slices out of here. Really pleasant that way with the, the ice cream and the whipped cream. Left over the next day cold, I could totally get behind some, and I recommend cold pie or apple pie for breakfast the day after Thanksgiving. That is like a tradition here in our house. So this is it. Simple, streamlined, go-to method that is repeatable. You're in charge. You have complete control over how much sauce is in there, how cooked your apples are, and the flavor profile. There's room for interpretation. I've left this really basic. If you wanted to flambe some raisins and rum and add that in there, cool. If you wanted to make this more than an apple pie and add quince and pears, go for it. If you wanted to add some additional spices, whether nutmeg and cardamom or something like that, there's freedom here. You've got a good solid base to work off of, but at the end of the day, I mean, this is really all you need. If you want a solid classic apple pie that everybody's gonna love, this is it. I went through everything one step at a time, right? Apples, crumble, pie dough. That's not the reality of how these things work. If you break the project up into those pieces and you do one thing at a time, it's gonna take a lot longer. How would we put this together in a way where everything just flows into the next thing and we're efficient with our time? Well, while your apples are marinating, so you cut them and you marinated them before you cooked them. In that time, make your crumble. You'll have plenty of time to make your crumble while your apples are marinating. So streamlining the process. While your apples are cooking, get your pie dough going. I mean, your pie dough should be, kind of finished and pressed into that 1-inch disc and into the fridge, before your apples are needing to be uncovered. So something like that. And then when your apples are done cooking, maybe another hour later, then you can knock out your pie dough. So one thing can just kind of flow into the next. You can be multitasking as you go. So that's how I would roll. And you also have the choice of, you can make that crumble, 3 or 4 days in advance if you wanted to just eliminate one more thing.